Hello, I'm Jennifer Ziegler with Germanna Community College, and I'm here today with Chris Muldrow. He's one of our instructors here at Germanna who teaches all of our small business technology programs, and today he's going to talk to you about websites.
Jennifer, thanks for having me here. I think we'll have a good discussion today about the new technology that people need to run their business.
So tell me, Chris, if I own a small business, do I really need to have a website?
These days you really do. For a long time, there was some question as to whether you needed to develop a website, but these days there's so many people online and so many people using the web to communicate, to conduct business, to get new business, to reach out to customers, that it's really, really important that you have a website these days. It's rare that I'm seeing small businesses that have chosen not to go that route. And typically what happens when they choose not to have a website is they're leaving a lot of money on the table because people are finding their competitors online. So yeah, in 2014, you really do need to have a website for your business.
Can you tell me how much all of that would cost?
Well, that cost can range from very inexpensive to very, very expensive. And a lot of that cost is dependent on what kinds of needs you have. So, for instance, if you're a business that's planning to sell retail online, you have to have an e-commerce system to enable people to buy things and enable you to keep track of what people have bought. Well, that's going to be a whole lot more expensive than if you are, say, a construction company that just wants to show your latest projects and serve as sort of a business card on the web. So the price ranges all over the map. I would say, for a very small business, starting out, something that's, again, just trying to be a business card online where people can find them, they're going to get away with a few $100 by the time they're all done. If they're a medium-sized business, they're probably looking at a few $1,000s to get the work done that they need to do. And then if they're a business that's really decided that the web is where they're going to do a lot of their business, so they've got either e-commerce or they're doing a lot of reaching out to customers or bringing new business in through the web, well, it's going to be a significant part of their yearly budget. So it's not like a once and done sort of operation for somebody like that. It's going to be much, much more expensive.
Once I have this website created, how do I keep all of this maintained? Am I going to need a web designer to do this?
What happens with websites is you can build a website or have a website built, and there are lots of different ways that you can manage and maintain it. And so I like to tell people that there are really sort of three tiers of website maintenance, and it all starts at the beginning when you decide to build the site as to which of those you're going to get. So the least expensive way to do it is to go with a service like Google Sites or Microsoft, and they have services that allow you to build a website for a minimal fee every year. So Google, for instance, Google Apps for Business will allow you to build a site as part of that service, and that is going to cost you like $50 a year. And for that, what you're going to get is a fairly basic website that isn't a template. So it's, the rough sort of structure of the site is already established. But from there, you can go and edit things online, and so you can maintain it yourself. And so for a smaller business, for $50 a year to be able to change things on your own, that's a really good option.
That's affordable.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, when I talk to nonprofits as well, I typically advise nonprofits to look at services like Google Sites or Microsoft 360, so they can actually do that and keep their budget really small, because they have the same needs, and they typically don't have a whole lot of things that they're doing that are really crazy that require them to go to that next step. The next step is actually getting someone to design a website for you in what we call just sort of flat HTML. And what that means is they do design, and they'll build the site out, and HTML is a language that these sites use to show up on your web browser. And typically in that kind of scenario, you're going to pay somebody to build the site for you, whether it's an employee or a contractor. And it's going to be a development process, and they're going to build the thing out. And then when they're done, you've got a site, and it's great, or not. And if you need changes made, you have to go back to that web developer to do those changes, because you have to have somebody who knows how to do HTML. And so in that case, that might be on a contract basis where you get a certain number of hours from that developer every month, or it may be a case where you hire them on or bring them in as you need them. And the one thing about HTML is if it's not very complex, you don't have to use the same developer. So if they move or something like that, you can usually bring somebody in and they'll be able to pick up where the person left off with a little bit of learning time. The third option, and this is becoming much more popular these days, is what's called a content management system. And so a content management system is sort of like the first option, but it gives you a whole lot more flexibility in what the site looks like and what you can control. So let's say that your site has menus on it that you want to go pick and go to different sections, or you want to create new sections, or you want to add new content to the site. A content management system is going to let you do that, and you will basically be able to control everything on the site. And they're harder than the Google option, but they're also better in many cases than having to pay a developer to do changes anytime you want to make changes. Typically, I recommend either option A or option C. Just getting somebody to do HTML development these days, where you have to bring them back in, is not the best option these days, because the content management system will allow you to make changes when you want to. And then if you decide you need a developer to do it, you can reach out to them and you can bring them in and do that. But you can make a lot of the changes on your own. So that's sort of how the site's maintained. And then the big question you have to ask is, with option A or C, is that an internal person that I'm getting to do that, or am I going to hire somebody on a part-time basis to update things? Luckily, in those cases, the person that you get to do those updates doesn't necessarily have to be an HTML developer.
How exactly do I reserve a .com address? For instance, I have a business. I want to make sure that my .com matches my business name. How do I do that?
That's a great question. So everybody wants to reserve their name, right? They've got an idea of the website name that they want, and they really want to go get that name. And one of the tricks in 2014 is that a lot of the names are taken. I think every English language name .com is taken right now. So you can't be shoe.com. You're going to have to buy that from somebody. So what you have to do is you have to find what's called a domain name registrar. And there are a lot of companies out there that do this. GoDaddy is one that a lot of people have heard of. Network Solutions is one of the original registrars. There's a company called GKG. There are a lot of different registrars out there, and they're in charge of selling names for websites. And so you go on the site and you do a little search, and you look to see whether the name you want is available, and typically you're going to find out that it's not, and you have to go find another name. Most people I know go through 2 or 3 or 4 before they find one that's actually available. And they might have to go from a .com to a .net or some other what's called a top-level domain in order to get what they want. That you're seeing more of that now because so many .com names are gone. But once you find that, you actually go and pay. It's about $11, $12 a year to register a name. And you basically say, I want the name, and you run your card through, and suddenly you own that name. You don't have a website yet. You don't have an email yet. You don't have any of that stuff. But what you have is you have your domain name. And so that registrar is going to hold onto that record, and you'll then be able to point that record at the computer where your website is hosted. So it's important for people to remember that you got to pay to register the domain, and then you're going to have to probably pay to build the website out as well. But it's not that expensive. Like I said, it's between $8 to $12 a year for a .com, .net name. If you get one of the stranger names, sometimes you pay a little bit more.
Can I use that domain name for my email address too?
When you reserve a name, let's say Germanna.com as an example, you don't just get that name. You get what are called subdomains. So the www.Germanna or the mail.Germanna or college.Germanna. You actually get all of those names when you reserve your domain name. And one of the things that you get is you can actually point these names at different services. So once you've reserved a name, you can have an email address at that name. Now, you're still going to have to get the email hosted somewhere. Just because you bought a name doesn't mean you automatically get email, but you can have any email addresses you want at that domain name once you've gotten the name. So a lot of people don't understand that once they've gotten a website, it's fairly trivial to now have email addresses at that website domain name. And again, it's not that hard to set up. Most web hosting companies will help you register, and then they'll help you get your email address set up as well.
Can I run all of this technology out of my office, or how do I do that?
Well, I do see businesses that want to run their web servers out of their office sometimes, and they ask that question. A lot of times IT departments will want to do that because they want to maintain control over their servers for security reasons and other things. And my recommendation is, unless you've got a very compelling security need to run it out of your office, it's always better to have this hosted in what's called a data center, whether you're using a third party to do that or finding a place to host it. And there are a lot of reasons for that people don't think about. Number one, you want the power out, or power running all the time. I actually used to work for a company that had their web servers hosted in the building. And we were in Alabama, and occasionally tornadoes would come through and knock power out. When power was out, our websites were down. And so that wasn't good. If you go to a data center, they've got generators that are hooked up to big diesel tanks, and they keep running when the power goes out. The other thing that they have is very high-speed data connections, where if you've got a lot of traffic on your site, they can handle that, and most office environments don't necessarily have that available to them. The other thing is, a good data center is actually going to have more than one data provider coming in, and the reason they do that is if somebody runs a backhoe through one of the connections, you've still got a good internet connection coming through. All of these are things that most office buildings don't have, and so I always recommend don't keep it in your office unless you really have to keep it in your office. And the situations where you have to keep it in your office are very rare.
Are there any pitfalls that I need to watch out for?
There are a few things that you want to watch out for when you're building a website. A few things that can kind of catch you. The very first one is when you go and register that domain name. If you're using a web designer to do work for you and they're helping you through this process, if they register your name for you, make sure they register it with you as the administrative contact. Because what I've seen happen in the past is you'll have some designers who will put themselves as all of the contact names in that registration. Well, what that means is they own the domain, you don't. And so if you ever decide to move to a new designer, or if they go somewhere and disappear, you're going to have a very, very hard time getting control of your domain. And so one of the things I tell people is make sure that that domain is registered in your name. You don't want it registered in somebody else's name. And most good web designers do that now. They don't register it in their own name. They go and register it in your name and give you control over that. So that's one pitfall to look out for. One pitfall also to look out for is to make sure that you're going to get training from whoever does your site for you, particularly if you're getting a content management system. These systems all work different ways, and you can typically find information online about how to use them, but it's always good to get some training in how your particular site was built if you're using one of those, because it's very easy to, again, have someone work on your site and they move or whatever, and suddenly you don't know how to change things.
So Chris, can you tell me a little bit more about some of the other classes that you teach here at Germanna Community College? You said you did small business technology.
Well, I have lots of classes, and they're all focused on small business and technology. A lot of it is focused around web technology. So I have this class that we talked about a little bit today, which is web hosting, and we get into more of the details about how to do all of this stuff. I also have put together some classes around mobile. And one of the things that we're seeing now is more and more people are using mobile phones and tablets to communicate. And so we've got classes on mobile and tablets that are really great. We also have classes about marketing and digital marketing and how to sort of build your small business online. And those are really helpful because I think a lot of people don't understand all the ins and outs of like advertising online or doing online marketing, even if they're used to doing marketing for their own business. Things are so new and different that's changing a lot. So we talk about how to start from scratch and sort of go out and market your business in a digital environment.
If you have any more questions about this class or any of the other classes we offer here at Germanna, just visit our website at www.germanna.edu/workforce, or you can contact our registrar at 540-891-3012.